So, Rasika, can you share a bit about what is personal genomics and why we should go for a DNA test?
Yes. I hope everyone can hear me now. Please ping in the chat window if any of you suddenly lose connection or you're not able to hear, so that we know what's going on. I understand there's a lot of people. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to just briefly explain to all of you what the word personal genomics means. I know Sushant has done a great job in sharing information very, very regularly with all of you via blogs, via Sushant's calling me again, Meeta. So
Yeah.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, start.
okay. So
Yeah, Rasika.
yes, like I was saying, I thought I would just start off by explaining what personal genomics is and why personal genomics. Thanks to Sushant's highly informative blogs and his constant, text messages in the WhatsApp group, I think most of you are aware that there is something called DNA testing for wellness, health, and fitness. So let me begin from there. Um, I think without getting too technical, let me just tell you guys why we test for DNA and what your DNA code means to each and every one of us. So all of us carry this blueprint or source code in every cell of our body, and that's our genetic material. That's our DNA code, which we have inherited from our parents. Thankfully, thanks to our schooling, we all know this already. Now the DNA code is unique it's unique to each and every one of us, which is why it's essential to unravel that information if you want to understand your body, which is what Sushant also has been writing about in his blogs. The reason we harp on why DNA is unique is I'll take a simple example here. I know we know that the English alphabet has about 26 letters, A through Z. Your DNA code also is like a source code with a lot of alphabets in it. Just that instead of 26 letters, you're going to have 4 different letters. I'm not going to get into technical details, but you also tend to have single letter changes in your DNA code, and these changes make you unique from everyone else. Interesting fact is that all humans are actually 99.5% very, very similar in our DNA code. And yet we all look so different. We behave so differently. We respond to exercise differently. We respond to food differently. And that's only because of that little, percentage that's left that is making us all very unique. So this is, in essence, this is what drives your body to behave a certain way, perform so many biological reactions that occur in your body every day 24/7. That is being driven by your genes and your DNA code. Now from a fitness perspective, why genomics is important, or it's suddenly a very trending topic, is because you can actually tap into your genetic code to understand how your body works with respect to nutrition and fitness, and thereby you can personalize what you do when you eat, when you work out, when you take care of your health, etc., etc. And that is where Map My Genome comes in. It offers you those complete DNA tests, those solutions, those genomics based solutions, so that you can in a very sustainable manner reach your fitness goals and maintain them for different stages of your life. Now all this has lifetime benefits. So in essence, personal genome means your genome. All your genetic information put together makes up your genome. So the word personal genomics is nothing but the whole scientific study of an individual or a person's genetic material, the whole of it. Okay. If you want to, if you'd like to know, I think it's an interesting fact that our DNA code is actually 3.2 billion letters long. Imagine that it hosts that much information. So it's amazing. Yes, you can ping your queries. Someone's just asked. You can share your queries in chat. That's the only way we can track questions. So please do. But we will address them at the end of the session after puja is also done, so that it helps us maintain the flow. Yes. So, like I was saying, our DNA code makes us unique, and we have these single letter changes which affect the way we respond to exercise and diet. And that is where our tests are beneficial, because they help you unravel those insights. They help you know what works best for your body. So, in a nutshell, if I had to summarize the benefits, or Sushant's question as to why DNA testing, I want to lose weight, why should I get a DNA test? There are 5 major benefits. So, to
Rasika, you've gone mute. You'll have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
where did you? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you can hear
Yes.
you.
Okay. Sorry about that. I don't know how that happened, but all right. So, benefits of DNA testing, guys. If you're a fitness enthusiast, if you're someone who wants to lose weight, or you have gotten back to a fitness regime after a break, you could be at any stage. DNA testing is useful for anyone in any age group. The reason is, first up, it tells you about certain strengths which you can tap into when you exercise or when you formulate a plan. It also helps you know if there are any potential risk factors or something that could be a hurdle for you attaining your fitness goals. So it's predictive in nature. Something that you can know about much before symptoms manifest is extremely valuable when you're working towards a fitness goal. So prediction is one main benefit, and these predictions are going to help you, personalize your own fitness regime. So, Sushant and Sakshi have been working with you guys for so long in training you guys. I'm sure they customize each workout to each person's needs. They customize each diet plan to each person's needs, depending on what fitness level they are at and where they want to go. So there's already so much customization happening. Now, DNA testing takes that whole customization to a, it just revolutionizes it, takes it to a whole new level by looking at something that's inherently a part of you. You were born with that information, and in essence that information does not change for the rest of your life as well. So you can use that information at any age during different stages of your life. So that is why it makes it very powerful, the next P. So it's predictive, it's powerful, it helps you personalize your routine, so there's personalization, and it's participatory. The reason it's participatory is, what do you do with those genetic insights? That's where you play the biggest role. So you drive your own health, you drive your own fitness by using all those genetic insights, and you tailor your workout routine, you tailor what you eat, and how you take care of your health. That way you get to the fittest version of yourself. So it's a completely participatory program as well. It's not that the lab gives you a report and you're done. That's actually just the beginning. The report is the beginning. I know Pooja will agree with this, because you have to take those insights and you have to apply them to what you're currently doing. There will be some tweaks, some modifications, but very, very important modifications, which could help you maybe minimize trial and error. I know I've gone through trial and error. We've all gone through trial and error. We try one diet, it doesn't work, we give up, we get demotivated, or we copy someone, we ask a friend, we ask a neighbor, we follow someone online. So we've all been there. Instead of doing all that, the message is that you want to look into something that's already present in your body, which is your genetic code. So using that, you could be the best. Person who drives your own fitness routine as well. And this information will help your fitness coach, it will help your nutritionist, it will help your if you're training for a marathon, for example, you could be working with a sports medicine specialist also. It will help them as well, because there are some clinical impacts also for these genetic variants, which Pooja will also later explain during this session. So in a nutshell, these are the benefits of why personal genomics, or as they call it now, they call it fitness genomics, they call it exercise genomics, sports genomics. So this is why you should get the DNA test. So Shant, are you there?
Yeah. Fine. Uh, so next, we would like to understand: do we have a sports gene in our body?
Sports gene.
Yeah.
Okay, this is a very popular question, and I've been asked this question a lot of times also. Is there one gene that determines whether you can be an athlete, or is there some single or a set of fixed genetic factors which will tell you what you should do and what you shouldn't do? Um, Technically, there is no sports gene as such. There's no single gene which makes you a good sports person versus a not so good sports person. The first reason is that genetics is only one part of what determines your athletic outcome or your health outcome or your wellness. It's genes and your environment which interact with each other and determine your final health outcome, right? So I could be predisposed to gaining weight when I eat a lot of high fat foods, for example, versus someone who could still get away with eating more than, say, 25 or 30% fat in their diet, but they don't gain as much weight. Now, these kind of differences do stem from genetics, but genes alone do not determine your final weight on the scale or whether you will perform well at the next marathon. The reason being, this is something you guys are already familiar with because you are into training already, is that training matters a lot, right? But how you train matters even more. So you could be doing a workout which is challenging, yes, but maybe it's not using all those advantages that you inherently have because you didn't know about them. For example, I realized when I got my genetic test done, I was told that I do not have the gene which encodes a lot of power muscle fibers in my skeletal muscle, for example. So there is a certain kind of muscle type which helps you display a certain sudden surge of power in a very short amount of time. Okay, so let's call them the power muscles. So I don't have that genetic marker, which means I am likely to train and perform better in an endurance event. I could have a greater stamina for a longer period of time, but I might not be able to run a 100-meter sprint race. I could still do a marathon. Maybe I could do 1 hour of Pilates on the mat or power yoga or something like that, right? So this is how you use that genetic information to get to the fittest version of yourself. So there is no way that genes alone will determine your final outcome, but they are a very, very important input for you to decide how you get to your fitness goal through the best route, and you maintain that fitness level or get better from there. Because there are so many other factors also which genes affect. It's not just about whether or not you'll be a good athlete or whether you'll be good at exercise. There's factors like injury risk. You might be predisposed to certain sports injuries, but you just decided that you want to get into badminton or football or something like that. Or you could be predisposed to a food allergy, but you didn't know that there is a genetic predisposition. So these kind of insights can help you prevent symptoms, and that way you ensure that you get the best outcome for yourself. Sushant?
Yeah. Great. Uh, that's great input you have given because I was also facing the same problem when I do my workout. So I generally do
Yeah.
long hour workout, and
So
as
your
my other
endurance
gym
too.
partners probably, yeah. So I think I have more inclined to endurance training
I
rather
know
than.
I'm in the endurance category. I've given up. I suck at plyometric workouts. If you tell me to do all these 20-minute bursts and all, I can't. I'll give up. But you give me 1 hour of something else, I'll do it. So
Yeah, same here. So it is interesting to learn more about when we talk of DNA or genomics, what kind of inferences or insights we get,
yeah,
right? Because that will improve from the perspective of our customers who are coming for a fitness plan for a transformation.
right. What
Because
aspects you mean?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So there are so many aspects which um, right now I'm talking to people who are very, I think you all are very, very fitness conscious and more aware than the average gym goer, I would say. So I can tell you guys that there are so many intrinsic factors which determine your overall fitness, right? Heart health, gut health, everything influences your fitness level. So from a DNA test, from a single DNA test, you can infer more than 100 insights, for example, which ultimately go as feedback into formulating that final fitness plan for you. I'd like to take simple examples here. I think all of you are aware about something called antioxidants in our body. So let's consider antioxidants. Now, antioxidants are like these superheroes in the body. They detoxify, they're sort of the cleanup army of the body. They detoxify your body. They help your organs stay healthy, and they're good. Of course, they're good for things like skin and hair. Everyone knows that as well. But there is a certain gene which regulates some enzyme activity in the body, which helps you maintain your antioxidant levels. So that defense system is always up. Now, if there is that single letter change which I mentioned earlier in your DNA code, say you have that single letter change, and because of that, that enzyme is going to be functioning at less than 100% efficiency. Maybe it's functioning at 70% efficiency. Because of that, your antioxidant stores in the body could be lower than someone who does not have that genetic variant, right? Now, this does not mean that you are immediately going to fall ill, or your hair is going to come out, or you're going to get injured in the next year. And this does not mean that, but it does mean that with the presence of this genetic variant and an unfavorable environment, you could be more vulnerable to a less than desirable outcome. For example, if I'm not taking care of getting enough healthy food in my diet, getting adequate rest between heavy training routines, I'm not letting my body recover and get back its antioxidant stores. On top of that, if I have a genetic variant, I could then be at risk for some negative effect of antioxidant deficiency. Maybe internally the cleanup doesn't happen faster, or I get more tired during my workouts. Such things might happen. So um, so antioxidant activity is one example I wanted to take to explain about what kind of insights you get from DNA. So with respect to nutrition, it's not just antioxidants. You can understand if you are sensitive to, say, high fat intake in your diet. I know the keto diet is very popular. I don't know if you recommend it to your customers, Sushant, but the keto diet is very, very popular, but it is genuinely not something which works for everyone. There are documented negative effects of a keto diet, from hair loss to severe gut issues as well. And there have been many studies which identified a genetic factor also, which means you could gain weight if a very high percentage of your dietary intake comes from fats. In fact, there is a fitness influencer. I don't remember her name. She actually posted this, and that post went viral. She got her test done abroad with a genetic testing company, and she realized that she has this genetic variant which will make her gain weight when if she were to go on a high fat diet. And she was on the keto diet, and she was struggling with weight gain. When she got this report, she went off the keto diet. She went back to a regular diet, but still with low carb and high protein, but not necessarily keto, and she saw better results, right? So with respect to nutrition, whether it's about fats or carbohydrate intake, vitamin levels, we get these kind of insights also from a DNA report. Now, vitamin levels are also essential. All of us know that vitamins are not just for you know it's each vitamin doesn't perform just one function, does it? They're all interlinked. They all function in tandem with each other to maintain your overall health. Now, genes also produce these proteins which perform these reactions. They are catalysts, right? They are catalysts for helping your body absorb these vitamins or convert them from one form to the other. So if you have a genetic variant, it's possible these catalysts are not fully functional. Maybe some activation isn't happening in your body. Maybe some absorption is below the normal level, which is why you could be, compared to someone who does not have that genetic variant, you could be at a greater risk for vitamin deficiency. Again, all these insights are actionable. That's the best part of personal genomics, because once you know what your DNA says, there are some specific modifications which Pooja will also tell you about, that when you apply them in your regular lifestyle, you can achieve whatever outcome you want, right? So for example, if I am at risk for, say, folate deficiency, I know that because of this genetic variant, I might need a specific supplement or increase my dietary intake, and so on and so forth. So nutrition wise, there's a lot of insights that we get from DNA. And from a pure workout perspective, for all of you who are interested to know what workout I should do, the first thing I can think of is your muscle profile. So are you likely to train and perform better at a power based workout, or should it be endurance based, or do you want a mix of both? This is one of the most widely studied genes in sports genomics studies. So I think a lot of fitness coaches are also very familiar with this concept right now, that you can do power versus endurance profiling via DNA testing. You could also derive insights about heart health. I have mentioned heart health earlier as well, not just for athletes, even for regular gym goers. I think today we are all interested in doing an extreme workout now and then, if not every day. So when you do perform extreme workouts, high volume training, there are certain cardiac factors that you have to consider, and they need to be monitored very regularly. And if you are at genetic risk for a heart condition, it means your coach or you should monitor your heart health more closely, right? there could be specific recommendations for doing so, or even during a workout, you make sure that you keep tabs on your blood pressure or your heart rate. You have to be constantly monitoring that if you have a genetic risk. And especially for uh, really high level elite athletes, this is actually extremely important, because there's enough literature to prove that heart conditions and young athletes, there's a very strong risk. Young athletes are actually a high risk group for heart conditions. You'd think that they're super healthy. Of course, they're super healthy, but they are at risk for a lot of heart or cardiac anomalies as well. And there also genetic testing plays an important role. And injury risk is also another area where you get very valuable DNA insights. I think all of you know that you don't, there are certain rules when you work out. Maybe you don't work the same muscle group every day, or you don't do the same workout every day, or between two intense days you take a break and then get back to the gym. Your coach keeps telling you these things. Why does he do that? The reason is muscle takes a certain time to recover, and this recovery depends on some key factors in your body, like how the tissue repair is happening, new cells are being formed. All this is being driven by genes, your genetics. So your genetic code also determines your recovery rate as well. And you could be at a greater risk for, say, a football injury or a sports injury like ACL rupture. So knowing about that genetic risk will help you ensure that you have a prolonged participation in whatever fitness regime you're doing. So that's another focus area I'd like to mention. We also have a very interesting aspect in DNA tests, especially in the one that we are offering, which is your neurological profile. So when you learn a new skill, or you suddenly join it could be a simple thing. You could join a Zumba class, or you could join a complex martial arts class also. It's not just your body which is doing all the work. Your brain is learning a lot, and there's a lot of mind body coordination happening. So neurological signaling also has a very strong genetic component. So things like memory, your feedback based learning, and your resilience. How likely are you to power through in a high stress situation versus being more sensitive to stress, which could be induced by extreme workouts as well. So we test for those genes also. And we also test for gut health and food intolerances. A lot of us know about gluten intolerance, lactose intolerance, peanut allergy. There are genes associated with these conditions. We get those also from DNA testing. And we also test for kidney and liver health as well. I think protein intake is a very hot topic for every fitness coach and nutritionist. High protein diets are vouched for by a lot of people, but when you have a lot of protein in your diet, you might overdo it. For some people it might be 1 gram per kg per day, or whatever they're following. But a very high protein intake also means that you need to monitor your kidney function regularly. Now, if you have a genetic risk for kidney disease, you definitely cannot go more than 1 gram per kg per day, right? So we have also included kidney health there, and liver health also. The liver is the key organ where all your detoxification is happening. Everything that you eat, whether it's a pill or food or anything, the air that you breathe, everything is happening in the liver. So ensuring that your liver is healthy, I think, is extremely important for fitness. So we also do DNA testing for liver health, and there are conditions like liver cirrhosis, which can occur in people who exercise regularly and in athletes as well. So that is why we included that. So this is just a brief overview of what kind of focus areas or what kind of insights you can get from a single DNA test. So Shant? I think he's on mute.
Yeah. So I want to ask one question here. Can you shed some light in terms of leptin hormone? Because a lot of people who are fat or obese,
Yeah.
their fat cells reduce a lot of leptin, right? Or maybe they may be are leptin resistant. So probably is there any genes which we can we test to get to know about leptin or leptin
Yeah.
resistance?
Yeah, so I think leptin and ghrelin, I think this relationship is talked about a lot, and they are called the hunger and satiety hormones, if I'm correct.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
hormonal signaling, I should have mentioned this earlier when I talked about the focus areas. Endocrine function, your hormones, they are a major regulator of your health and fitness, right? So whether it is about having just that odd tendency to snack at night, or not feeling full after meals, or which is called satiety, that feeling of fullness after you eat a meal. All these things are, yes, they are driven by genes. There are genes associated with appetite, eating behavior, neurological signaling, how your brain signals your gut that it's full or it wants to eat. All these things are in fact regulated by genetic factors. Some of these genetic factors could be inherited, and about this Pooja will also explain later. There are some inherited changes which can be more I don't want to say dangerous, but they could be more serious, or they could have a bigger impact on your health than just having a common variant in your DNA, right? Now when you have those inherited changes, it is possible that symptoms manifest very early on, from a young age, and you might need way more intervention than you would for a normal person. So it is possible for us to test for such changes also. But I think I discussed this with you also, Sushant, earlier. If someone is diagnosed with something like an enzyme deficiency, or a condition like insulin resistance also, or leptin resistance, if they are diagnosed with it, the right approach to that would be to focus on those genes which we know are associated with that condition or trait, and we would look for changes which we know can cause that actual condition. That way we are going with a more diagnostic approach as well. But yes, we can do DNA testing for that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Uh, I have a question for Pooja now. So, who actually needs a DNA test?
That's a good question, actually. So when we talk about who really needs a genetic test, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So thanks, Sushant, and for all of you guys who are asking questions. I've been looking at some of your questions, and some of these are related to like personal kinds of issues, and we definitely take those on. But in terms of going back to Sushant's question, who needs a genetic test is pretty much anyone who believes that they want to live a slightly more informed way. So it's definitely possible to try and achieve fitness goals and health and wellness oriented goals just without doing a genetic test. And people have been doing this, for very long, even before genetic testing became available and affordable. But now we know for a fact that when people go through a trial and error method, it can cause people to experience, just frustration from not getting the results that perhaps other people might be getting. So you could put two people on the exact same diet or the exact same, regimen in terms of training, and they might both have different kinds of responses to it. Or you could put two people on the same medication and they could both have different responses to that. And so anyone that wants to not do this trial and error approach in order to reduce frustration, reduce potential side effects of drugs, perhaps, and just maximize the efficiency of whatever it is that you want to do with regards to either fitness or with regards to preventing certain health conditions, can benefit from a genetic test. We usually talk about how it is much better if you're a little bit younger, in the sense that if you don't already have a bunch of conditions going on. So if I'm looking at a 70-year-old individual, who has heart disease, who has diabetes, and who has multiple other issues which are being medically managed, then perhaps I would say they might not be the best candidate for a prevention focused test. But if you're overall healthy, and if you have certain goals with regards to, shifting how you think about healthcare and make it more prevention focused, and if you want to just have a well informed approach that is not based on trial and error, then a genetic test might be appropriate for you. We usually recommend that if someone who is younger, so who is a minor, if some minors get genetic testing, we recommend that once they're 18 years old, that they set up genetic counseling appointments for themselves so that they can understand what the report means for themselves. But truly, the younger you are when you do this test, the earlier on you're able to put into place some of the strategies of risk reduction, be it dietary management or lifestyle modification or screening tests. The earlier you're able to do the test, the earlier you're able to put these into place and the max benefits you will gain from it later on in life. So there's no real answer to who should get the test. And I don't want to say everybody should get the test. But if this is your aim for your own health and for your own fitness, then you might be a good candidate for it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. So out of this product, whatever predictions we get, maybe even if we talk of there's a risk element involved. So is this risk 100%?
That's an excellent question again. So like Rasika was saying, we have a whole bunch of genes that are sitting around, in our bodies. And actually, the truth is that the 3.2 billion is the number of letters. So we have only 4 letters in our DNA. This is the truth. But those 4 letters are actually strung together. And the sequence of what those letters should be was something that was put into place, in the 2000s, for example. And we actually figured there was the Human Genome Project, and we know exactly what letter needs to be at what position. Any changes in those letters from what should be there, and there is some natural variation. So again, like Rasika was saying, we're about 99.9% exactly the same as human beings, but it's that 1% difference. And that 1% of 3.2 billion is actually a big chunk. So we think of it as, oh, just 1%. But if we look at it, the number of changes that we have between each other, those changes are what we call markers or single nucleotide polymorphisms or SNPs. The actual number comes up to about 10 million SNPs that exist in the human genome. So it becomes very important to think about how the changes in your DNA are actually not disease causing. So it's not a mutation that stops a gene from working, but these are associations, which means that if I have, a letter T, and if Rasika has the letter C at a particular place, then she might be at a lower risk for diabetes compared to me, which does not mean that for 100% sure she would never get diabetes or I would definitely get diabetes. It is a risk, and so it is probabilistic information. We oftentimes will compare this with the risk of the average person. So we're all human beings and we all have risks. This is the truth. No one wants to hear it, but we're mortal beings and we all have risks. And one of the risk factors for these many multifactorial conditions is your genetic risk. So when we look at the risk result is not 100%. It just means that if the average risk is here, your risk is a little bit higher or your risk is a little bit lower. So it's not 100%. So I could have a high risk for diabetes, but if I knew that I had a high genetic risk for diabetes, I could put into place, some good dietary modifications, some good lifestyle changes, and also do screening tests regularly. I could possibly avert developing diabetes later on in life. On the flip side, I could have like a no risk, or an average risk, like a not high risk for diabetes, but I could be a couch potato who ate potato, and then that would definitely cause me to develop diabetes. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's definitely not 100% predictive. It is also not diagnostic. It does not tell you whether you have the disease right now, and it does not tell you that you're 100% going to develop the disease. But it does say that based on the markers we saw in your DNA, we see the same markers in the DNA of people who have the disease. So you are at a higher risk of developing the disease. And here are the things that you need to do to reduce your risk so that hopefully you prevent the disease from happening. Or you do these screening tests and you catch yourself at a stage where you are pre-diabetic or just borderline, and you can go back into the normal side of things better. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks a lot. Uh, so another thing I want to understand is, so how do we, identify some sort of medical conditions through genomics, and how can we can use that to eventually manage our fitness level, our health level?
It's it's really easy, and it's actually almost important now, more and more. So medicine used to largely be a very treatment focused kind of an approach. So it wasn't necessarily health care, but it was more like sick care. So once someone fell sick, when someone became ill, is when people would swing into action. And oftentimes, what that ended up doing was that the symptoms would get worse until someone actually got diagnosed. And then they were given medication, and then luckily, if the medication worked, then the symptoms would come back, and then there would be a loss of health for a short period of time. But what personal genomics can achieve is that it can help you identify what was basically an invisible kind of a risk. No, we can't look in. I mean, we could look at a lot of people on the outside and not really know what kind of DNA they might have. Family history can be a good proxy, but the most objective information that you will get is from a personal genomics test. So the way to identify an actual clinical condition could actually also be to do one of these kinds of genetic tests. Again, it's not necessary that everybody does a test, but if you want to shift again, if you want to do this stuff earlier on before it becomes an actual diagnosis, then a genetic test can help you identify your genetic risk. Once you know your genetic risk, you can reduce the risks that come from the environment. Perhaps at this point, it's important to talk about this genes versus environment. Some of you guys are probably familiar with this, and some of you aren't. So, just for the benefit of everyone, when we talk about illnesses like heart disease, diabetes, or cancer, we often refer to them, in genetics, we call them multifactorial conditions, which just means that these are conditions that get manifested because of the involvement of multiple factors, hence multifactorial. One of the many factors is your genetic risk. Other factors include things like your nutrition, your level of exercise. Do you have a sedentary lifestyle or not? Do you have other illnesses or comorbidities or not? What does your family history look like? How old are you? What is your gender? So these are a few examples, of risks overall. So your genetic risk is, in a sense, a piece of the pie, and it's a non-modifiable risk. You can't change that technically. Um, so while your DNA-based risk is non-modifiable, the risk that can come from some of these other elements are modifiable risk factors. So once we know someone's genetic risk, we can put into place strategies of risk reduction so that they can reduce their overall risk. And then, a clinical condition that can be diagnosed will get diagnosed much earlier on. And in fact, Rasika had actually alluded to some of the most serious conditions. So there's conditions related to, especially like the heart. So hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, it's a big word and you don't really need to know what it means, but it basically is an illness of the heart muscles, and it causes the heart muscles the walls of the heart to essentially get thicker than they ought to be. And if you guys are familiar with any news from like the football arena, in terms of just deaths of footballers, actually just from running all over the ground, I think sometimes these kinds of deaths or sudden deaths can actually be prevented if someone knows that they have an increased risk for one of these kinds of conditions. Then perhaps they can modify their exercise routine. They can perhaps do things a little bit differently. And this is true not just for some of the scarier or life threatening type conditions like hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, but even if you have a risk for something like ankylosing spondylitis, for example, or disc degeneration, for example, or if you have, like Rasika was saying earlier too, like if your detox mechanism isn't working well, and if that in turn puts you at risk for injury, and if it reduces your recovery profiles efficiency, then these are all things that you can get information from a genetic test in order to just go along in an informed kind of way. So the I don't know if that answers your question, but in terms of a clinical illness, while a genetic test is very, very helpful to help identify if someone is a candidate for, possibly having an actual clinical condition, oftentimes a genetic counselor. So, like Rasika was saying earlier on, once you get your report, that's not the end, that's actually the beginning, because you will then get set up with a genetic counseling appointment where we will plug into place, medical history, family history, a person's individual, nutrition, diet, lifestyle, whatnot, other illnesses and everything. And then we figure out, there's a risk assessment that goes on from a medical perspective. And then if someone gets to becomes at high risk from, a genetic counselor's risk assessment, then they will be asked to do some clinical tests. So if I have a risk for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, or if I have a risk for myocardial infarction, this is just a jargon word for a heart attack, then even though my genetic report will pick that up as a high risk, I will need to do tests to find out for sure for a diagnostic purpose. So sometimes the genetic test can inform what clinical test is important to do or not, because we know that a lot of us are supposed to do a lot of kinds of screenings, but sometimes we don't, and sometimes we don't even know what to do, and we don't even know which ones are relevant. So most people just do this complete health checkup, some annual package that they are sold, by whichever company, and it might not be really personalized to them based on what is important and what is relevant. So genetic test can almost personalize a prevention focused plan that includes screening for clinical conditions that might be relevant for someone, which is actually based not on just here is a good package, this is good value for money, go do it, but it's actually based on their DNA, and what is recommended for one person might be very different from what is recommended to another person. Sorry, this is a long-winded answer, but hopefully it answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Rasika and Pooja, for patiently answering all the questions. So before we move to question answer session, probably we would like to throw light on how we are jointly working on helping people, achieve their fitness level. So probably this is specifically for people, for all who are working in corporates, who have a long working hours, and who actually are facing lifestyle disease or at the risk of it, right? And uh, under this pandemic which has happened, so probably a lot of people are working from home. Their mental health.
So Shant, your voice is not clear.
Yeah. So essentially, what we are doing is based on the insights which we are getting from the genomic testing done with Map My Genome, right? We are evaluating the personal trait of each and every individual, and then using that traits to personalize the fitness and nutrition plan for them. So it will involve both workout and nutrition, right? So it also takes into account if you have some sort of lifestyle disease, if you are suffering from thyroid or diabetes. So probably all these things would be duly considered, and the indications from the DNA testing would be incorporated to structure a plan. And then based on that plan, we doesn't stop here. So probably we make sure that we implement that through our platform, where we have all the expert trainers and nutritionists which provide service online to the customers, right? And then we make sure that within a span of period when they are they are enrolled with the program with us. So we enroll in such a way that that's a DIY model. So probably after they are done with the program, they have done the transformation, they can do the whatever they have learned on their own. They don't need us after 6 months or 9 months for a duration. So that's what we are offering. And so essentially, it's something which a lot of fitness models and people who are going to gym would not be aware of, that how why a solution for a particular individual is different from another one, right? So that's
Right.
why we have built genomic testing into this model, so everyone knows that a solution for say for me may not be a solution for Rasika, or may not be for Mita, right? So everyone has that personalized solution at place. So that's what we have been jointly contemplating to provide this sort of fitness solution for all the people. Right? I hope we have been able to very clear in terms of our message, what is genomics, what is DNA, how we're using, what kind of insights we get, what are the predictions we get, are there risks involved or not. So now we are open for questions, and
There is
Mita,
one.
can you just yeah.
Okay,
There
sorry, you
is
can.
Mita.
I'll tell. Yeah.
Yeah, you'll
So
tell.
I'll just start with all the questions from the beginning.
Sure.
There's Fareen Fatima and Niranjan Agarwal who wanted to know how much does a DNA test cost and where can we get it tested?
Good place to start.
Yeah. Sushant, you want to take this one?
Sure. See, the folks who are joining our program, right? So, to be frank, it's inbuilt in our price, right? So, right now, it's as far as in our conditions, whatever we have signed with MapMajom, probably we can share the whatever subscription we charge for the test for the entire program. But individually test, if you go directly to any other genomic testing center, probably it will be much higher than what we are costing, what we are charging.
Wow. Are you saying that everyone that takes up your services, Sushant, is already anyways going to get a genomics test? Is this what you're saying?
Yeah, because our plan is based
That's
on the
awesome.
insights of genomics. Yeah, so
Okay.
anyone who doesn't want to go for a genomics test probably is not our customer, right? To be very frank. So ideally, when we are talking of personalized solution for a client, he has to. That's our basis. That's the insight we get. How do we know that what kind of solution would be better for me or for anyone, right? So this is the sort of scientific insights which you are getting from a DNA test, right?
Okay,
So
so
to be
the
frank,
answer to some of you guys' questions about how much does the DNA test cost for you guys who are already with this group, it's going to cost you nothing.
And it's
yeah.
once in a
So
lifetime, so you better do it.
yeah, so it's not a test we have to go every 3 months or 6 months
Yeah.
down the line. So
Mhm.
it's a one-time test
That's
until unless
very
you want
cool.
to add some more insights or some more indicators. Probably then you have to re-go for a test. But in most of the cases, it's a one-time test. It's a one-time cost, right? And so that's if you really want to. So in terms of pricing, probably you can you can buzz me one-to-one. We have different plans based on the fitness goals and the kind of time you can devote for your body. So we can share that insights, right? Next question, Mita.
Yeah. Yeah. So Dhruv asks, are you going by NGS or array? And is the database basis Indian data or Caucasian race?
Yeah, I saw this question much earlier.
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah, I like Dhruv's question. Pooja knows I like this question. So, Dhruv, we do this. We have tests which are, as Pooja and I mentioned, there are some tests which are predictive in nature. So, they are for personalized health and fitness, like the one we discussed today. And there are some tests which are diagnostic in nature, which we also discussed today, as in there's someone who's clinically diagnosed and you want to find out if a mutation caused that disease, and you might screen others for it as well. So, for predictive tests right now we use the microarray platform, and that allows
For
us to get
prognostic
a
test. Mhm.
yes prognostic tests, yes, and that gives us microarray allows us to have a genome wide scan, so we can do lakhs of markers across the genome, because since these conditions are all multifactorial, they are located across so many genes, there's multiple locations in the genome, we need to test for just one condition alone. Because of that, we need to use an extensive platform like the microarray. And for tests which are diagnostic in nature and which are used for confirming or just confirming a suspected diagnosis or confirming a genetic diagnosis for an inherited condition, we use NGS, which is next generation sequencing, for those of you who don't know. And that's what we use for diagnostic tests. And our database, I'm very happy to say that now we are in 2020 and my genome successfully has sequenced enough samples in the Indian population. It was slightly more difficult to get Indian data when we started in 2012 and 2013, because back then we had Indian data for only very commonly widely studied conditions like diabetes, heart diseases, and obesity. But for a few other conditions, there simply wasn't enough Indian data. So our goal was to sequence more and more samples and use that information with consent, of course, to build a database, and that will validate our algorithm and our analysis. So today I can happily say that Map My Genome has a sizable database of at least, I think the number is between 9,000 to 10,000. I don't have the exact number with me right now. We have those many Indian samples, and we use this database for validation of the genetic markers that we test, trend analysis, product development. It's used everywhere. So yeah, we do have Indian data as well, and we have Caucasian data also, because we have catered to customers across the globe as well.
Sure.
To
Thanks,
kind of just summarize what Rasika was saying, so just to break this down in the simplest way, so Dhruv, to answer your question, these fitness type personal genomics tests are done on a chip using microarray technology. If somebody has a genetic syndrome or a suspected genetic syndrome that is being passed on from one generation to the next, then that confirmatory diagnostic testing for the genetic syndrome is done typically through NGS. So this test for personal genomics for fitness and for overall wellness is one that is chip-based.
Yeah, micro.
And in terms of reference data, exactly like Rasika was saying, again, just to summarize, we have Caucasian databases as well as now the Indian databases, and both of them actually are used together because some of those actually help inform what markers are relevant, and then we try to kind of tease apart from the Indian population. We focus a lot on what somebody's ethnicity is because we get samples from across the globe. So if you are of, and we actually ask people questions also, what your ethnicity is and things like that, so that we can refer to an appropriate population. So there's also an informed like a history sheet that goes out to people who do these kinds of tests. So it's recommended strongly that you fill that out to as much completion as you possibly can with your own medical history, with your family history, and with details of what part of the world do your ancestors come from, because that can make the difference in how it is analyzed and the kind of filters that we might use.
Thanks, Pooja and Rasika. The next question is from Jatin, who wanted to know if you could share a consolidating list of these fitness tests.
Yeah, so I think we have discussed fitness tests, complete our comprehensive health and wellness test, which covers 100 different parameters in the body. The fitness test covers about 50 different parameters in the body. We also have a nutrigenomics test, which focuses on nutrition, that covers about 15 important parameters in the body. I think Sushant, would you be sharing a list or something for Jatin and others who asked?
Yeah, I can share.
Yeah.
I can share this which we have agreed, right?
Yeah,
so,
the one we have agreed on. Yeah.
Yeah, I will
So
share.
in a nutshell, these tests, there's a test for just nutrition, there's a test for complete fitness, which obviously includes nutrition, and then there's a master DNA health check. It's called Genome Patri actually, and it has about 100 different parameters. It literally scans everything from top to toe. There's heart health, there's autoimmune, there's cancer, there's neurological conditions. There's a lot of interesting traits in your body. There's drug response. We call it our most comprehensive test. We have that also. That's for health and wellness.
Sure. Thanks, Rasika. Sahit Singh says, I feel extremely acidic every day in the morning. Is it related to my gene, and how do I cure it?
I'm sure all of us get asked these questions. We ask ourselves these questions. We worry. The first question that pops into our head is, did I get it from my parents? Is that why I have it? So thing is, I think Pooja will also add after I speak. First of all, not every condition is necessarily because of a genetic factor. As she said earlier as well, these are all very complex multifactorial conditions. It could be something related to your lifestyle, but it could also be a genetic factor as well, as simple as weight gain. Why some people are more predisposed to weight gain could be a genetic factor, need not be a genetic factor. So we can't say for sure that this particular symptom or this particular pattern that you see in your health is genetic. There are genes which are associated with gut health, but it would be slightly difficult to narrow it down to just one factor which causes acid reflux. Pooja, you want to add something here?
Sure, no, absolutely. I think that it's a reasonable question because these are common kinds of
Yeah.
conditions really that we all experience from time to time. And if we tease it apart, there could be nutritional focused reasons, things like just not eating the right kinds of food or not eating frequently enough, not drinking enough water. These could be like just very regular kinds of reasons for why someone might experience acidity. Another reason could be GERD. Gastroesophageal reflux disease is fairly common. There are certain conditions that might increase someone's predisposition to developing GERD type symptoms. Oftentimes, if someone has, a diaphragmatic hernia, which is basically um, like an aperture or an opening in your diaphragm and things like that. And these are again complex genetic conditions that could increase the risk for GERD as well. But I want to say that GERD is a multifactorial condition, but we know that in 31% of cases that there is genetic involvement as well. But what I would recommend that if you are experiencing acidity, which is significant, which is what we call, hyperacidity, I would recommend that you speak to a gastroenterologist. They might actually do an endoscopy and take a look at what might be going on. It might be a diagnosis that is necessary. It might not necessarily be a clinical, it might not necessarily be a genetic diagnosis, but I would strongly recommend that you go to a doctor and get that evaluated. And usually, medication works. Depending on what the symptoms are, there are medications actually. And in fact, now that we're talking about it, isn't omeprazole one of the drugs that we check, Rasika,
Yeah.
for in terms of drug
We
response?
have, yeah, we have proton pump inhibitors. I think we have about six of them. They're all from the same family.
Correct.
So,
And they're all responsible for, they're part of the drugs that are used to treat acidity. So sometimes, and this is one bit that we actually didn't touch upon through this whole talk. So, this one question also, thank you for asking this question. It helps us talk a little bit about how we can try and find the right kind of medication at the right time so that, the best medication is one that has high efficacy, which means the drug does the job it's supposed to do, and low toxicity, which is just a really scary word for a side effect. So we want to strike that balance between efficacy and toxicity. And there is omeprazole and a bunch of other, like Asika was saying, proton pump inhibitors, just all this jargon for medicines for acidity.
yeah,
I
anti.
don't know if your acidity is genetic or not, but we
Yeah.
do know that gastroesophageal
So while
reflux
we are
disease.
answering Sahij's,
Go ahead, Mika.
Oh, Sahej has added something.
yeah, he's added a question again. He's allergic, highly allergic to dust and other particles as well. So is that the missing link? Could that be the missing link to acidity?
It could be at this point, however, I respond to this. So I have clinical expertise in medical genetics as well as in just for my training and all of that. But sometimes when we look at allergies, so when people who have allergies, they might be prone to inflammation. Inflammation is actually considered to be protective. It's your body's response really to infections and things like that. But when your immune system goes a little bit gets a little bit hyperactive, over enthusiastic in a sense, that's when it can trigger off some kinds of conditions that could increase your risk for allergies. And dust can be a very common trigger. And we know that for people who have one autoimmune or kind of a condition, that they might be also at an increased risk for another one. So GERD and allergies and things like that, they could be, under the same umbrella of
Yeah.
something that is related to your immune system and your inflammation and things like that. Uh, but at this point, it would just be speculatory, So this is the first thing I think of from a clinical place, that it possibly could be connected, but the honest truth is that it also could be two completely different things. And then we're just trying to, I don't want to just mesh things together now just because you're presenting them to us, So I think the best thing that you should do
Yeah.
is to speak to a doctor. At this point in time, it definitely, from a medical perspective, we can see these things go together sometimes. People who have allergies can have, dust allergies and skin allergies, and can have rashes and can have asthma and can have acidity and can have Crohn's disease or irritable bowel and things like these can all coexist together under the umbrella of autoimmune type conditions. But
Immune.
I don't feel very comfortable saying, yes, it is definitely those two things are connected. Definitely speak
Correct.
to your doctor. It could be connected, but the first thing to do is to get a clinical diagnosis and let's figure out what's going on with you, Sahej, so that you can first take care of yourself and so you're not suffering like this with the hyperacidity. The first line of treatment would usually be dietary intervention. If needed, then medication, and there's ways to go ahead from there.
Yeah. So he's asking again, due to COVID, is there any other alternative other than consulting a doctor, which I can do at home itself? I do not
There's
think
many
that will be
doctors who are
recommended.
actually happy to do these appointments over video. So you should
Yeah.
find a doctor who's
Yeah,
willing to do
that's what
that.
I
And
was
a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
doctors who
so
started
he
to
can
do
Yeah.
give
these
them
video
information.
appointments.
It can't be done at home. Yeah. Even I second that. Yeah. So I'll move to the next question from Niranjan. He says, can you share a sample report copy or something for better understanding and explanation?
I think I had shared MyFitGene and MyNutrigene and Genopathy with Sakshi and Sushant. So Sushant, you can send
Okay.
that across, yes, or Meeta
Sure,
can
I will share. Yeah, I
Yeah.
will
So
share.
we'll get in
have,
touch with
yeah, for the
Niranjan.
complete wellness test, for the complete fitness test, and the nutrition specific test. These are three main products that I think these guys can look
Okay.
at. So it gives them a good idea. So in the snapshot of each report, you will understand what parameters are being covered also. Gives you a good idea of the scope of each test.
Sure. Thanks. Next question would be from Sanjay, who asks, do we require DNA testing only once or regularly after every interval?
Oh no, once in a lifetime.
Mm,
I
yeah.
mean, we covered this earlier as well. Your
Correct. Correct.
DNA code, unless you're kidnapped by aliens and taken somewhere and then they put you back, I don't know. I really don't think
Uh,
they show it in
Actually,
the movie.
Sushant has already
Maybe.
answered that.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
think your DNA code is going to change. So like Pooja mentioned also, your genetic risk, once you understand that you have a genetic risk for something, that is not going to change, but your health outcome, your fitness level, that is completely in your hands, right? But you don't need to do the DNA test again and again. You can use that information in every decade of your life. So
Correct.
that's
I think that even answers Saurabh's question, who asked, do we need intolerance testing more than months? So again, the answer would be no.
intolerance testing. If they are doing the regular blood test, they might need to do it multiple times.
Yeah, not with the DNA.
Not the
Yeah.
DNA test. No, even so, no.
Correct. Okay. So Pooja Janwar says, I have been exercising regularly after a few months of healthy diet. If I again start with normal food, which does not include fried foods, I start gaining weight again. This is becoming very demotivating.
I hear you,
of
Pooja.
course,
That's all of us, isn't it?
go ahead. No, of course it is demotivating because I mean you've put in all of the effort in order to lose weight or to just achieve whatever your target weight might be. And I feel like I think it's important for all of us to recognize is that if we have achieved our
Yeah.
target weight, it is from doing these things. So when we stop doing those things,
It'll come back.
So maybe,
then this
maybe back
might
to where it was.
play. So it perhaps is there is some more nuanced discussion to have though. So once you have achieved your target weight, while most people are happy to celebrate, and sometimes you will celebrate with pigging out too. This is like just and it's just the worst way to do this. But I think it's important to think about maintenance
Yeah.
as well. So when we think about maintenance, then you're doing justice to all of the hard work that you and your team have done. It's not easy to exercise regularly. It's not easy to follow, a pretty regimented diet, but slowly it becomes some kind of a habit. That habit eventually becomes some kind of a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And I think if you see it as less like achieving a certain weight and more like embracing a certain way of living, then you are more likely to succeed at maintaining the lifestyle that would finally enable you to achieve whatever weight. So I usually, when I'm speaking with patients, I try to explain to them that the numbers on the scale or the number on the measuring tape and all of these things, these are really not important. Our approach to health must be health. So if you focus on nutrition and if you focus on exercise, the weight is just an outcome of these two. Those are mere consequences. So I'm going to challenge you to at some point get back to focusing on nutrition and focusing on exercise, and to stop thinking so much about the weight. The weight is only, it's an outcome, and it's not something that is very motivating. And we must remember that sometimes these things are just, I mean, they're media propelled, all this nonsensical size zero, size this, size that, six packs, what not. And like some of it is photoshopped, a lot of it is not real. But what is real is health. And
Yeah.
what facilitates health is nutrition and exercise. And that is really different for everybody. So the best way to really avoid that frustration and that demotivation is to completely drop the target as being weight. Make your target your health, and that automatically will prioritize nutrition and exercise. Everything else will just follow.
Thanks,
It's a
Pooja.
mind shift.
I'll also add to this. So this I have experienced with a couple of clients we have served. So point is, when anyone goes for weight loss, they think that if we eat less, we will lose weight. So once they do that, their body become accustomed. They burn less calories, then they come to a normal diet, and then probably they start building up weight. So the point is, which on an overall basis, like whatever calorie deficiency you're creating, it should be through your workout and through your physical activity, rather than from a diet. And that is the reason why a lot of people regain weight after losing. So again, as adding to your point that instead of focusing on weight, is focus on health, because focus on a consistency of doing workout, having a healthy diet, sleeping on time, keeping yourself away from stress, although which is very difficult, right?
Yeah.
So these are some pillars of fitness and health which people should follow, and if they don't do that,
And you
probably
guys, this is what Sushant has just shared is something that nobody will tell you. They would rather give you one plan and say, do this, do this, do this, or eat this, eat this, eat this, don't eat this. So this is, it needs to become some kind of philosophy. And what Sushant is saying to you is really the honest to God kind of truth. There is everything else is a cell. Everything else is just a cell. So if you really want to focus on health, then this is the exact way to do it. So Sushant, thank you for sharing that. But it's not very often that we hear fitness, because it's almost in many big ways it's commercialized to such an extent that sometimes it's almost a lot of people are given the target of weight, which is very irresponsible, and it is also harmful physically as well as psychologically. I feel it's not a healthy place to approach health from. So what Sushant said is, Sushant, thank you for saying that. It's something that I strongly believe in, and I speak to all of my patients. So everyone that gets a genetic test gets a genetic counseling appointment, and sometimes it is just shaking people's mindsets about what all of these things are that ends up happening through this. So if this is already where you're functioning out of, then more power to you. This is great. You guys are in good hands.
And one more point. So to everyone, please never subscribe to any supplements. Don't go for any pills.
Yeah.
It is not going to work. These are all short-term gains, which again is going to bounce back. Right? So don't go for any protein shakes, no supplements, no BCA, no pre-workouts, nothing. Just focus on your natural diet and focus on be consistent what you are doing. You will achieve your goals.
Yeah, that's the key word. The main word you said there is consistent. I think all of us struggle with that. I
It's
know I
tough.
do.
Yes.
I know I struggle with consistency, and I don't lie about it also. Sometimes my students ask me, "Did you work out today?" And I said, "No, I have not worked out in 7 days." It's not the end of the world. But what Pooja said is also true. You should not think that my goal is 56 kilos or 66 kilos at this time. You should only think of your goal as, did I exercise today, or did I exercise at least thrice this week, or did I eat 80% healthy or 90% healthy, the 80-20 rule, whatever works for you. You should just forget the weight. You should only think of
And to take that further, Rasika, is that what I usually challenge a lot of folks to do is to not think about most of my meals should, because then people get into this they call it something, the cheat day. It is like, I don't know what this
cheat
is.
day is a horrible concept. It's a horrible concept.
Correct.
I completely
So
agree.
instead, I usually try to talk about, I will always go back to a very psychology. So as a genetic counselor, I have expertise in medical genetics and psychological counseling. And I tend to borrow a lot from my psychology experience when I'm speaking with patients. And one of the most important things that I will tell anyone for health is that at every moment, we have a choice every moment, you know.
Yeah.
So when you're choosing to order from Swiggy or from Zomato, you can still choose a healthier option,
Yeah.
and you can always ask yourself, "Am I making a choice that is good for me?" Then great, and then ask yourself, "Am I making a choice that is not good for me?" And if you're going ahead with that, then perhaps you have to ask yourself, why are you self-sabotaging? And it perhaps it speaks to bigger issues, and none of those are bad. It doesn't make you a bad person or anything, but it just means that there is some stuff that you have to introspect, and your coaches will be there to walk you through some of those things that are truly challenging for all of us. So it's not like everyone who's sitting over here, and like Rasika was saying, I also struggle. And so nobody is beyond. We are all human beings. We are all, fallible creatures. So from time to time, it's okay to make a few mistakes. But from time to time, it's also important to have a quick check-in with yourself and be like, okay, can I catch myself? If I'm
Yeah.
if I'm on a spree of eating nonsense,
Yeah.
has that spree gone on for 2 days, or is it now like the end of a week of poor eating? And then you should perhaps just set yourself up for success rather than setting yourself up for failure. So somehow, if you have access to coaches who will walk you through that, it really helps when you're part of this kind of a community where you can check in with each other, like a buddy system or like a support group. It helps to vibe off the energy off of each other in many ways, and if you're surrounded by folks who are motivated for fitness, you will find that that is almost, it's infectious. Perhaps not as much as COVID-19, but you can pick that up from surrounding yourself by that. So I think it
Yeah.
helps to be consistent, even if you don't exercise regularly, to always be part of this fitness journey in your life, to always be in touch with your coaches or with your
Yeah.
trainers or with a group or whatever. It's almost like yeah, we're human beings, we're social beings. So collaboration is really, really important. So it helps a
Yeah.
lot to not think of yourself as, oh, this is, I'm alone and I'm on my journey. And this is not how we live as human beings, anyways. We're all interconnected to each other. So I think it's great if such a a facility exists where you have access to experts like these. I think just one quick conversation can sometimes bring you right back on track. Yeah, and that
Yeah.
can be quite motivating. So for those of you who are finding yourselves to be demotivated and are going through just a bad phase, reach out for help. It's also very important to recognize that it's important to reach out for help. Again, when you seek help, doesn't mean that you're a weak person or you're not doing well or anything. It just means that you're human and there's other humans there to help you out. So you should always reach out for help when you're going through a phase where you're not feeling so motivated, or when you're feeling bad about achieving some of your goals, whatever they might be. And you might end up either getting back on track, or you might end up revising your goals to make them a little bit more realistic, a little bit more achievable.
Yeah. So there's Manpreet who's asking, is there something called as clock genes? If yes, then please tell us more about it. Also, if it is there in this test.
It's not in the test right now. I wish I could say yes. Not in the test right now, but a lot of people have asked us about the clock gene, Manpreet. So I know everyone's reading about this gene. Everything's on. This gene has been talked about a lot in a lot of scientific articles. It has something to do with our circadian rhythms. There's also a link with aging, how your whole biological alarm and all that. Not the right word isn't alarm, but it has to do a lot with your internal signaling as well. As of now, we haven't identified the way we design our tests is we try to include those genetic markers which have the most robust scientific proof or published literature available. So we have a whole selection system, and we choose those markers which we know have a very very strong association with that particular condition or trait, or that particular that particular condition, I would say. So only when we identify those markers, we include them in our reporting, we include them in our algorithm, and we that's when my team knows that I can put it in a customer's report, right? That's when it can go in a customer's report, because if I'm telling someone that this is your risk or this is your predisposition, I need to be sure that marker is very strong. So right now it's not in the test because we haven't identified within that gene which markers are most associated with an individual's health. There's a lot of studies still going on. I think there are thousands of individual markers already reported, but we hope to add this very soon because this is a very interesting finding, and I'm sure that we will be able to narrow it down and add it to the test. But right now, it's not in the test.
Okay. Yeah. So the next question would be from Natasha, who says, "What is the likelihood of Indian law enforcement adopting a system similar to the American Forensic Database of CODIS, etc., to deal with crime control against women?"
The likelihood of Indian law. Pooja, you want to take this one?
Sure, absolutely. So I
Or
think when we talk about forensics, it definitely becomes superbly important to first of all develop that database so that we can
yeah,
then compare, because and not just for crimes against women, just crimes overall. And I understand that as a woman, that of course this is where you're coming from, but like criminal forensic sciences is definitely it exists right now. And I think that perhaps if a database is built, then that can be helpful. But also, I want to say that when we're building these databases, it ends up going back to a lot of questions about, and this is really what we have learned from American science and medicine and the history of medicine and research actually in America is just the whole medical ethics, that just because somebody is a criminal, is it okay for us to gather their DNA and then hold it up, whether we have consent from them or not, and if someone behind bars actually provides consent, is it really free consent or not? So there are many issues and challenges related to that, but I have to agree, Natasha, that it is definitely going to be an important way to perhaps just identify, even if not control, but to even identify criminals, and it could be a good way of investigation. But I have to say also that forensic evidence, historically speaking, is not considered substantial enough in order to incriminate somebody. So there is other kinds of evidences that are important because of how easy it is sometimes to just plant forensic evidence as well. So there's again been some more learnings from just some cases where people have been wrongfully trial and just put behind the bars as well. So the short answer to your question is yes. The longer answer is that there are, with some nuances and with some important things, and this perhaps has a bigger discussion about the law and order system of the country that we live in today. It's a great question, Natasha.
Thanks, Pooja. The next question is from Sakshi, who asks, "Is gene test viable for children, let's say infants, in case we want to determine what genetic risk they face and design a nutrition plan accordingly?"
nutrition, yes. Even for pediatrics, I think it becomes extremely relevant because, like we discussed earlier, we cover a lot of conditions which could manifest at different stages in one's life, right? Some of them could be early onset, some of them could be midlife onset, and some could be late onset. So I think the general concept, which Pooja also tried to explain earlier, that in general, if someone's young and healthy, it's good for them to do a genetic test. They want to identify potential risks and stay healthier for longer. And when it comes to infants specifically, we actually have had family stake tests like Genome Patri or MyFit Gene, where the parents and the children also get tested, because they potentially could have done this either because there's some history of a lot of lifestyle disease, or with respect to nutrition, food allergy could also be inherited. I know for a fact that so many doctors are writing about the rules about pediatric nutrition have changed. For example, I recently had a nephew. What his parents feed him is very, very vastly different from what my mother fed me. So vastly different. And the things the doctors are telling them, And I'm like, really? That's not mom was told when she fed me, but it's changing. It's very dynamic. So I think slowly doctors will realize that it actually makes sense to involve genetic testing at some point, but it might not be in the infancy stage, I would say, because for an infant it might not be needed that you go and do a genetic test. It can be done, yes, but
No,
from a
I would also like to interject at this
yeah.
point. Rasika, thanks for everything that you have said, but to add a slightly more medical layer to this, and this is of course Rasika is well aware of this, but sometimes newborn screening becomes
Newborn
extremely
screening.
important as well. So newborn screening is something that is part of the healthcare system in places across the
Yes.
globe. Unfortunately, there is not so much regulation in terms of the healthcare system in India. But what newborn screening does is that it's a genetic test that is NGS based, typically
Yeah,
test.
diagnostic.
There's also ways for it to be array based, but it needs to be a really comprehensive kind of a chip or an array. But usually, this is a diagnostic kind of NGS based test to look for changes in the genes that are actually disease causing, not an association, not that this is seen in people who have this, but it's actually a gene change that interrupts the way the gene is supposed to function. And that in turn will cause an actual illness in children. And sometimes,
Yes.
because these are what we call autosomal recessive conditions, it just means that we inherit two pairs of genes, one from one pair, one from dad, one from mom. So if one is working, one is not working, the one that is working does the job enough. So it compensates for this guy that's not working. But if mom has this and dad has this, so if two parents are a carrier, then if mom passed this, it's a 1.5 risk. If dad passed this, it's a 1.5 chance. So then each child for carrier parents who will never know they are carriers because they are healthy. There will typically not be family history because people, it usually exists in the carrier state. But sometimes when children have this kind of a genetic makeup for different kinds of genes, and there's hundreds at least of genes that can be result in inborn errors of metabolism. Some of those can actually be very, very important to diagnose early on. Good examples are, phenylketonuria, G6PD, whatnot. There's a whole bunch of conditions that if your child is diagnosed within the first 3-4 days of life, then making a few changes to this child's diet, like to not eat this or to add a little cofactor, for example, or a supplement which is medically required, that could be life saving to a child, or that could prevent intellectual disability, which we now call mental retardation. We no longer call it mental retardation, so it can cause intellectual disability. But there's many of those things that can be prevented if a child, a newborn, has newborn screening, which is actually part of the healthcare system across the globe, but is not part of the healthcare system in India. So it can be beneficial for a child to get newborn screening, where there's genetic newborn screening, but that is different from the genome patri. The genome patri or the MyFit gene will not be able to diagnose a genetic condition. It could help identify, if a child might be at risk for lactose intolerance or a vitamin deficiency or things like that. But I truly believe that, every child should have newborn screening, because we can really prevent some kids from dying or from developing some conditions that are truly preventable if only they were diagnosed earlier on in their lives.
Pooja, this is also true, right? Some of those conditions, I think about, there are some statistics which say that 80% of IEMs or metabolic disease in newborns are preventable just with the right nutritional intervention in the first few weeks. And the other important reason is that apparently some of these conditions, you want to do the newborn test as soon as just say 48 hours after birth also, because some of these conditions manifest when they're 6 months old. But if you test them, but they don't show up in the blood test, which is done typically at a hospital, right? So a genetic test would actually help you look at something which the blood test maybe is not reporting, because it will show up
Yeah.
the infant is 6 months old. But if the gene comes back, as Pooja said, it's a mutation, so it means it's confirmed, diagnosis is done, the doctor would, I think, step in and do the nutritional intervention directly, and they can actually prevent it. Is that right? That's right, right? I mean,
Yeah, that's
there is a
absolutely
timeline
correct.
also, that the timeline also get
Yeah.
addressed.
Yeah, 48 hours is exactly right. Because, I mean, that is a good time for the conditions that would manifest earlier on, but also it would let you know for, some of them are earlier onset, some of them are adolescent onset and things like
Yeah.
that. But I cannot tell you the number of cases I have seen, and we have also together seen, Raska, at Map My
Yeah.
Genome. Um, just truly heartbreaking cases, just couples that have had a child and who just passed away because
They didn't
of a
know.
genetic condition and they had no idea. Mm. So sometimes it's important when we think about all of the tests that are done during pregnancy and all of this. I don't know, like people are happy to store cord blood cells and all of that, which might not really be very, very helpful. I wish more people would just do a newborn screen. I think every child should have a newborn screen test. And universal newborn screening is the norm across the globe, but not in India. Mm.
Yeah. I think that brings us to our last question right now from Shambhavi. Some suggest different diets according to the health, genes, and multiple such factors. Is it really important to focus on genes while keeping nutrition or diet in mind? If yes, can you please explain?
Yes, the whole nutrigenomics concept, we did not go into a lot of detail during this discussion. So again, there are two aspects to nutrition, and why genetic testing is important. One of them was mentioned by Sushant also. You could be talking about someone who is just at a genetic risk for a nutrition deficiency and hence needs early intervention, or you could be talking about someone with a proper inherited mutation in their body, and because of which they are not able to metabolize something, right? So either way, the genes, the genetic part plays a huge role there. So choosing your nutrition or your diet based on your genetics, yes, it does make a lot of sense, because um, you know uh, this brings us back to what Pooja and I have been saying during this discussion, that to understand what really works for your body, you have to look into your genetics. You have to
I
look into
think tennis player Djokovic is a good example to talk about.
which one. Oh yeah.
Djokovic.
Yes, yes. He that I think in Djokovic's case, I think he developed gluten intolerance. Was it, Pooja? Yeah, he was identified to have the genetic factor, which is one. I think one of the diagnostic genetic markers was identified for him for gluten intolerance,
Yes.
and then he completely reversed his diet. Obviously, he would have gone to a GFD, gluten-free diet, completely reversed his symptoms. So the thing is, some of these conditions, they don't really tell you. You don't know early on that something's going wrong with your body. People might report that they're facing some diarrhea or abdominal pain or bloating, and you don't know at that stage that this is because of some underlying intolerance. That becomes a major. I think a lot of people end up going to the doctor at a much later stage, and some damage has already been done, because once food doesn't get absorbed properly, or there's some malabsorption because of intolerance, your other nutrient stores also get affected. And by the time you know that, okay, now it's reflecting in my blood work, or there's an actual symptom, it might be more difficult to reverse those symptoms. In these cases, genetic screening really helps, because if you identify, I'm not saying if you have a genetic risk for gluten intolerance, you stop eating your chapatis from that day. I'm not saying that. I think a lot of people, a lot of nutritionists that we work with also, what they do is they try to minimize the overall exposure of gluten, maybe, for that customer, right? They might say, you know what, you're eating parathas every day, don't eat parathas every day. Maybe cycle through different grains during the week, maybe have rice on one day and something else the other day. So you can still minimize your overall risk early on, though you have not been diagnosed with that condition, or you could actually have a diagnosed condition, in which case genetic testing is still extremely important, because you have to do the diagnostic test, find out if it was caused by mutation. That also helps your doctor, confirm the diagnosis, and accordingly they will treat you as well. So yes, gene based nutrition is very real, it's very useful, and it is quite important.
Okay,
And
so
also
the
layers to that nutrition, no? Just the antioxidants, the
Yes,
vitamins,
they're all linked.
lipids, your
They're all,
tendencies for PUFA
yeah.
deficiencies, polyunsaturated fatty acids. Are you better suited to a high lipid diet? What is your carbohydrate sensitivity? Should you have lesser carbohydrate than the average person or not? These are all things that sometimes, and these are invisible things you
Yeah.
can't tell from the outside. So The genetic test is a way to demystify it. Like I was saying earlier on, like people have lived and eaten and done fine even before all of these things. This is just a way to get a slightly more informed approach, and it helps you. Yeah, it just, I like the word demystify because it's such an enigma, like we don't know what is going on inside of us until it manifests.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is a little bit too late. So if you already have a genetic test, then before you cross the thresholds, of having a condition, you can already start to screen, you can already start to make changes, and then monitor for those levels to make sure that they are low, whether they are, anti-gluten antibodies or whether they are anything, your blood sugar levels or cholesterol levels or anything. So it just gives you a way to make informed choices about your nutrition.
Okay, and that brings us again. There's a small add-on question: is it really necessary to store cord blood cells for Shambhavi itself? Again,
It's a very grey question, isn't it, Pooja?
It is a great question. It is highly controversial, but I'm happy to say this out here. So let me just properly introduce myself. So I'm the vice president of genetic counseling at Map My Genome, and I have been for at least like some 4 years now. And I've been practicing genetic counseling in India for over a decade. I've trained at the Johns Hopkins University, which was also a joint program between the Hopkins and the National Human Genome Research Institute, which is the place where the Human Genome Project was completed. So I come from a place of medical expertise, and I know for a fact that when we talk about storing cord blood cells, the likelihood that that will be useful is quite low. So usually it is helpful in certain kinds of cancers where you need a bone marrow, for example, or you need cells or something, and it is difficult to find a match from someone. But oftentimes an allograft, so your own cells might not be useful for the vast majority. So there's very, very few conditions for which stem cells can be useful to the child, and it's just something you want to bear in mind. So there's no right or wrong kind of an answer, but let's just say that the likelihood that stem cells will be useful once they are stored, cord blood cells, is quite low. But in that chance that your child ends up having that kind of a condition, it could be life saving. So it is about how do you want to do this. So if you have more pressing financial needs, perhaps not the most important. If you have a lot of cash to spare, then go for it.
That's one way to put it.
Yeah.
yeah. So I guess we've reached the end of questions. Sushant.
Okay. Yeah. So
Well, thanks so much for facilitating, Meeta. That was very well done.
Thank you.
Yes.
thanks, Rita. Yeah. So at this juncture, I would like to thank everyone for sparing time, coming and hearing us patiently, asking your questions. I hope we all have answered your question well, right? Still, if you have some questions, probably we have dropped our emails in the chat box. Probably you can write to us directly, right? So either of us, probably Rasika, you can also share your email, right? In case someone wants to connect to you directly.
Here in the chat box, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know if you need me to share the sample reports also. I remember I did, but
Yeah,
just
I have. Probably I'll share with
I just the nutrition part and the fitness part. I don't remember when I sent it. So. Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you, everyone, and we are very glad that you found this session informative because I think a lot of people don't know that DNA testing is available in India and that it's available in Hyderabad. So I'm very happy that we got to talk to a lot of you today and tell you that we are right here and we are not just making reports now. There's a complete solution now available. Thanks to the coaches and nutritionists at PFF also, so people can actually, implement it into what they do every day. So I think that's something Pooja and I are really happy about as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I
Thanks,
also
everyone.
have to put this out there. It really sounds like Sushant and team they really know what they are doing and they're coming from the right place and they're giving you good information, not like, this is your target weight and you achieve this and take this supplement and do that. So this is the right approach to this. And they really have partnered with us at MapMyGenome. We feel very proud to actually partner with you guys. But also to say that MapMyGenome is really India's pioneering genomics company. This is really cutting edge stuff and we're really wanting to make a difference to the Indian population. And this is where, like Rasika was saying later on, just building up on that database of, because it is different for different ethnicities and it is quite different for Indians. And so for you guys to have direct access um, to a bunch of experts, and this is never going to be just a one-time thing. The test is one-time thing, but our expertise at Map My Genome, whether it is from the technical team, like people as smart and as skilled as Rasika, or from the clinical team, like for someone like me, or for all of our analytics experts and everybody, that you have access to all of us. And because the DNA test is a once in a lifetime test, but health is ongoing, so we remain available. It's not just a one-time thing that you interact with us. So the test is once in a lifetime, but we always remain available and accessible to all of our patients, all of our clients. And this is just something that I wanted to put out there because I think continuity of care is important. And yeah, health and life is changing, no? So it's important for also that to be said.
Okay, thanks. Mita, would you like to add something at the end?
And I would just really thank both of you, as in Pooja and Rasika, for taking up time on Sunday, a long time, and giving the information, everything. It was really helpful. I'm sure the whole community has also taken benefit from that. And I thank all the people who've been here for your time and everything, and hope it was informative. Any further questions, please feel free to reach out to us. We've provided our email IDs.
Thank you, guys.